All right, we're diving deep today into a piece called Women's Equality, a call for social renaissance. And it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, it's not your typical, International Women's Day kind of piece.
Right.
It's got this bold energy to it. It's almost radical.
Yeah.
Like it's asking, what if we could just hit the reset button on society and build a world where equality isn't just something we hope for, but like it's just the default setting,
Yeah, I know. It really throws down the gauntlet. It makes you think it's not just about, trying to close the gap. It's about rethinking the whole system.
Totally.
And it doesn't shy away from the hard truths either. It really lays bare the inequalities women face globally, from, limited political power to deeply embedded cultural biases.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. It really makes you think. We toss around phrases like women's equality all the time, but this piece makes you feel the weight of it,
Yeah.
the sheer scale of what still needs to change.
It's huge.
It is. And what's wild is it connects this need for change to the idea of a renaissance, like a full-blown cultural and societal rebirth, but with equality as the driving force.
Right. And when I first read that, I was like, wait, a renaissance? That's usually when we talk about art and science blooming.
Right.
But then it clicked. This isn't just about catching up. It's about creating something totally new, a society where everyone can thrive because we've gotten rid of these old ways of thinking that are holding us back.
Exactly. And the mind behind this whole Renaissance for Equality idea is P.R. Sarkar. This piece is basically a collection of his writings, and his voice is so strong, so uncompromising. He doesn't mince words at all.
Yeah.
There's this one line that just stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, really?
He says, females are debarred from many socio-political rights. They are also human beings. They also have the same rights as men.
It's so simple, but it's so powerful.
It is.
For so long, women have been treated as less than human,
Right.
denied basic rights and opportunities. And Sarkar's just refusing to accept that.
He's like, nope, not anymore.
Exactly. He's drawing a line in the sand.
And he goes even further. He challenges us to look at the deep-seated dehumanization women have faced. I mean, just listen to this. He says, are women like cattle or sacks of cloth that people give as gifts at the time of marriage?
Wow.
He's using this shocking imagery to make us confront how absurd it all is.
That's what's so brilliant about his writing. He doesn't let you get comfortable with the status quo.
It's like a slap in the face.
It is. He uses these sharp, provocative comparisons to shake you out of complacency and make you really see the injustice.
Totally. And for him, it's not just about tweaking the existing system. He's calling for a radical dismantling of the patriarchal structures that keep these inequalities going.
Right.
It's not enough to just have a few women in positions of power. He's talking about a total overhaul of how we think about gender and power. We're going to really explore gender equality and not just, the problems, but actually solutions.
That's the most important part, right?
Totally. Like, how can we actually imagine and create a future where gender equality is just a reality?
And what's so exciting about the source material today is that it actually lays out a path forward.
A roadmap.
Exactly, a roadmap to a better future. And it starts by really digging into the historical context.
Oh, yeah. The history of how women have been treated is it's mind-blowing.
Absolutely. And the source actually highlights how in some societies, women were literally considered property.
It's wild. Like, no voting rights, limited access to education.
Yeah.
Sometimes even excluded from spiritual practices.
It's shocking, and there's this really striking example from 18th century legal doctrine, this concept of femme covert.
Femme covert.
Basically, when a woman got married, she legally ceased to exist as an individual.
So all her rights and property just transferred to her husband?
Exactly. It's like she was absorbed into his legal identity.
Wow, that's intense. It's amazing how those historical practices still have ripple effects even today.
Totally. But here's what I find so important about the source. It makes it clear that despite these historical injustices, women are inherently equal in value to men.
100%. They deserve the same rights and opportunities.
And the source uses this brilliant analogy from nature. Think about a bird with two wings.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Both wings are essential for flight, right?
Yeah, totally.
One wing might be slightly larger or shaped differently, but they're both crucial for the bird to soar.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It really drives home the point that men and women need each other to really succeed.
It's not about one being superior to the other. It's about recognizing the unique strengths that each gender brings to the table.
And speaking of unique strengths, that line from the source where it compares how women have been treated to domesticated cattle really stood out to me.
Oh, yeah, that was powerful.
It highlights how language can be used to subtly reinforce inequality.
It's insidious, and it's all around us. We need to be more aware of the language we use and the messages it sends.
Absolutely. But, haven't we made some progress?
Definitely, we see more women in leadership roles now, more female CEOs and politicians.
It's true. So are we on the right track?
We are, but the source cautions us against mistaking a few high-profile examples for true equality.
So it's not enough to just have a few women breaking through the glass ceiling.
Exactly. We need deeper systemic change. Yeah. And that's where this idea of cooperative leadership comes in.
Okay.
A lot of times when we talk about equality, we fall into this trap of thinking it's a zero-sum game.
Like someone has to lose for someone else to win.
Exactly. Like someone has to lose power for someone else to gain it. But Sarkar is saying, no, it's not about that at all. It's about creating a system where everyone can lead, where everyone's contributions are valued.
Okay, so hold on. Break that down for me a bit. What does cooperative leadership actually look like in practice? It's a pretty different way of thinking about things, right?
It is. It's basically the opposite of that hierarchical top-down model we're so used to.
Right, the pyramid.
Exactly. Imagine a world where leadership is more distributed, where everyone has a voice and a role to play in making decisions regardless of their gender.
Wow, okay. Now that is a vision. A world where everyone is empowered to contribute to lead.
Right.
I mean, I can feel the energy shifting just thinking about it.
Right. And that's what is so exciting about this idea of a social renaissance for equality. It's not just about fixing what's broken. It's about building something new, something better, something that works for everyone. It's like we're on the edge of a whole new era, a new way of being human together.
I love that. So how do we get there? What are the actual steps we need to take to turn this vision into reality? I mean, this all sounds amazing, but is it even possible?
That's the big question, right? And this piece gives us some pretty clear starting points. One of the things Sarkar emphasizes is how crucial education is in dismantling these biases and stereotypes that are so deep-seated.
Makes sense.
We need to be teaching our kids from a young age that everyone, regardless of gender, is capable of anything.
Okay, I'm with you on that. Education is always key. But how do we actually make sure education is promoting equality and not just reinforcing these old patterns? Like, what needs to change in our classrooms and our textbooks to make this happen?
That's a great question, and it's something Sarkar talks about directly. He talks about the need for educational materials that challenge gender stereotypes head on.
Okay.
For example, we need to make sure girls are encouraged in STEM fields, and boys are encouraged to explore things like caregiving.
I love that breaking down those barriers right from the start. Yeah. Because it's not just about giving girls same opportunities as boys. It's about creating a world where everyone feels free to pursue their passions, regardless of what society says they should or shouldn't do.
Exactly.
And speaking of breaking down barriers, Sarkar also talks about the need to get rid of all forms of discrimination and injustice. It's not just about gender equality. It's about a much broader vision of social justice.
Absolutely. And that's where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about making small changes to the system. We're talking about a fundamental shift in our values and how we structure society. It's about creating a world where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to reach their full potential, regardless of their gender, race, religion, or any other category.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, it can feel a bit overwhelming. Like, where do we even begin to tackle such huge systemic issues?
I hear you. It's a big task. But the key takeaway here is that change starts with each of us. It starts with challenging our own biases, speaking up against injustice when we see it, and making choices that support equality.
Okay, so it's about personal action, but also about systemic change, right?
Yes.
Like, our individual choices matter, but we also need to be pushing for bigger policy changes and challenging those power structures you were talking about earlier.
Exactly. It's a multi-pronged approach. We need to be working on both fronts, changing hearts and minds at the individual level, while also pushing for structural reforms that create a more level playing field for everyone.
So it's like a two-pronged attack on inequality.
I like that.
But how do we actually make sure those two prongs are working together? I mean, it's easy to talk about individual action and systemic change, but how do we connect those dots in a way that actually makes a difference?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. And that's actually a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We're going to be taking a closer look at some of the specific strategies and tools Sarkar suggests for achieving the social renaissance for equality.
So we've talked about how to achieve this social renaissance. We need both individual action and systemic change. It's like we need to rewire our brains while also like rebuilding the whole house, right? But where do we even begin with something so huge?
Well, Sarkar doesn't just leave us with this big vision, you know?
Yeah.
He gets into the details of how we can actually make it happen. And one of the most important tools he talks about is the power of the collective.
Ooh, the collective. Sounds kind of intense. But what does that actually mean here? Are we talking about like starting a revolution, like joining forces to take down the system?
Not exactly a revolution in the way we usually think about it, but definitely a revolution in our thinking. You know, Sarkar believed that when people come together with a shared goal, with that drive to create positive change, they can achieve incredible things. He called it coordinated cooperation, which I think is a much more powerful idea than just saying working together.
Coordinated cooperation. I like that. It suggests everyone has a part to play. Everyone's contribution is valuable. It's not just about a few people at the top calling all the shots. But okay, how do we actually coordinate that cooperation? How do we get everyone on the same page and moving in the same direction?
That's where things get really interesting. Sarkar talks about what he calls ideological associations, which are basically groups of people who share a common vision for a better future and are actively working together to make it happen. Think of it like a network of change makers all connected by this idea of a social renaissance for equality.
Okay, so it's like a network of little renaissances happening all over each one, contributing to the bigger picture. I can get behind that. But what would these ideological associations actually do? How would they work to create change?
They'd be doing all kinds of things, from education and advocacy to changing policies and organizing communities. They could create educational programs that challenge gender stereotypes. They could run campaigns to change public opinion, lobby for laws that promote equality, and even start initiatives at the grassroots level to empower women and girls.
Wow, that's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
So it's not just about talking about change. It's about actually doing something about it.
Yeah.
I like that Sarkar isn't just about lofty ideals. He's also giving us real tools and strategies to make those ideals a reality.
Exactly. He's not just painting a picture of a better future. He's giving us the instructions to build it. And what's even cooler is that this idea of coordinated cooperation doesn't just apply to gender equality. It can be used to address all sorts of problems in society.
Ooh, now you're talking. So we could use this same model to address things like racial injustice, economic inequality, climate change.
Exactly. Imagine a world where people from all walks of life are coming together in these coordinated, cooperative ways to take on the biggest challenges we face.
Okay, now that's a future I'm excited about. It's like, instead of feeling overwhelmed by all the problems in the world, we can actually feel empowered to be part of the solution. And I think that feeling of empowerment is really key.
Absolutely. Because when people feel empowered, when they believe they can make a difference, that's when things really start to change.
So how do we cultivate that sense of empowerment? Especially when we're up against such deeply ingrained systems of oppression, it can be easy to feel like our individual actions don't really matter.
That's a real challenge, for sure. But I think part of it comes back to this idea of the collective. When you're part of a group that's working towards a shared goal, it gives you a sense of belonging, of purpose. You're not alone in this, and that can make a huge difference.
Right. It's like even if what you're doing feels small, when you combine it with everyone else's efforts, it becomes part of something so much bigger, something that can really make a difference. It's like a ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
One small action can create waves of change.
Exactly. And I think another important piece of cultivating empowerment is shifting our focus from what's wrong to what's possible. Instead of getting stuck in negativity, we need to keep our eyes on the prize, on that vision of a better future that we're all working towards.
I love the focus on the possibilities, not the problems. It's like choosing to see the world through a lens of hope and optimism rather than despair and cynicism.
Right. Because when you believe that change is possible, you're much more likely to try to make it happen. And even if you run into roadblocks along the way, you're less likely to give up because you know you're part of something bigger than yourself.
So instead of asking, can we really change the world? We need to be asking ourselves, what kind of world do we want to create? And then let's get to work making it happen. But let's be real for a second. We've talked about all the good things about this social renaissance, but are there any downsides? Like, are there any risks or challenges we need to be aware of?
That's a really important question, and one that we should definitely think about, because with any big social change, there's always a chance things could go wrong. And one of the biggest risks I see is unintended consequences.
Oh, unintended consequences. Those are always tricky, right? It's like you try to do something good, but then it ends up backfiring in some unexpected way.
Exactly. And with something as complex as a social renaissance, it's impossible to know for sure how everything will play out. For example, as we challenge traditional gender roles, we need to be aware of the economic and social disruptions that could happen.
Okay, so it's not just about tearing down the old system. It's about building a new one that's fair and sustainable. We need to be thinking about the long-term effects of what we do and making sure we're not just creating new problems in the process.
Absolutely. And another potential problem is the possibility of backlash. Whenever you challenge the way things are, you're going to face resistance from people who benefit from the current power structures.
Right? People who are comfortable with the way things are and don't want to see them change. And that resistance can show up in different ways, from subtle undermining to outright hostility. So how do we deal with that? How do we push for change without alienating or demonizing those who might not agree with us?
That's where things get really tricky, because it's easy to fall into that us versus them mentality where we see anyone who doesn't agree with us as the enemy.
Right? And that kind of thinking can be really harmful to any movement for social change. It creates division, breeds resentment, and ultimately makes it harder to achieve what we're trying to do.
Exactly. So I think one of the most important things we need to develop is empathy and understanding. We need to be open to listening to different viewpoints, even those we might not agree with, and try to see where people are coming from.
Okay, so it's about having tough conversations, finding common ground, and building bridges instead of walls. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, right? We all want a world that's just and equitable, even if we might have different ideas about how to get there.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most hopeful and inspiring things about this vision of a social renaissance. It's not about forcing our views on others. It's about inviting everyone to be part of creating something better.
So it's like a giant group art project where everyone gets to contribute their own unique skills and ideas to create something truly beautiful and meaningful. And even though there might be some bumps along the way, even though it might get a little messy, sometimes the end result is something worth all the effort.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this vision so compelling. It's not just a fantasy. It's a real possibility, something we can all work towards if we really want to.
It's like we're not just dreaming of a better world, we're actually getting our hands dirty and building it together, brick by brick, idea by idea, action by action. And that's a pretty awesome feeling.
It really is. And I think that feeling of shared purpose of hope is what's going to fuel this renaissance and help us create a brighter future.
I love that, shared purpose, shared hope. That's a pretty good motto for all of this, don't you think?
I agree. And speaking of mottos, there's one more important part of Sarkar's vision that I think we should talk about, and that's the idea of personal transformation.
Oh, personal transformation. That sounds deep. So it's not just about changing the world around us, it's about changing ourselves too?
Exactly. Because in the end, the kind of world we create is a reflection of who we are. And if we want to build a world based on equality, compassion, and cooperation, we need to cultivate those qualities within ourselves first.
Okay, I'm noticing a theme here. Individual change leading to big changes in society. It's like the personal is political, but taken to a whole new level.
Exactly. And I think this idea of personal transformation is really what makes Sarkar's vision stand out. It's not just about changing laws or policies. It's about changing who we are as people. It's about evolving to a higher level of consciousness where equality and justice aren't just ideas, they're how we actually live.
Wow. That's a pretty profound thought. It's like we're not just talking about a social renaissance, we're talking about a human renaissance.
Exactly. And that's what makes this vision so powerful and timeless. It's not just a response to the problems we're facing today. It's a blueprint for a more evolved and enlightened future for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about working together, about breaking down these patriarchal structures, about changing ourselves. But let's get back to the heart of all this women's equality. What does a world where women are truly equal actually look like? Help me picture it.
Ooh, that's a fun one. Imagine a world where women aren't just present, but they're thriving in every part of society. We're talking women as CEOs, scientists, artists, political leaders, everything. And not just a few here and there, but a true representation of all the amazing talents and perspectives that women have to offer.
Yes, and not just in positions of power, but in everyday life too. Imagine walking down the street and seeing women who feel safe and confident, women whose voices are heard and respected, whose contributions are valued.
Right, and not just women, but girls too. Imagine a world where girls are encouraged to dream big, to go after what they're passionate about without limits, to know that they can achieve anything.
That's beautiful. And I think it's really important to remember that this vision of equality isn't just good for women. It's good for everyone. When women are empowered, everyone benefits.
Absolutely. When women are free to contribute their full potential, the whole of society becomes more prosperous, more innovative.
It's like we're unlocking all this untapped potential and creativity in the world.
Oh.
And speaking of energy, I'm feeling really inspired by this conversation. Like, All this talk of a renaissance is giving me hope for the future.
That's the power of a good vision, right? It can spark our imaginations, fuel our passions, and give us the courage to work towards something better.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious, what's one thing each of us can do today to contribute to this social renaissance for equality?
That's a great question. And I think the most important thing we can do is start by looking at our own beliefs and biases.
So getting real with ourselves about how we might be contributing to these inequalities, even if we don't mean to.
Exactly, because once we're aware of our own blind spots, we can start to challenge them and make choices that are more in line with our values. And from there, the possibilities are endless.
So it all starts with being self-aware, with that willingness to look inside and do the work. And then we can start to spread those changes outward to our families, our communities, and eventually the world.
I love that. It's like planting seeds of change within ourselves and then helping them grow through action and intention until they blossom into something truly transformative.
I love that analogy. It's like we're all gardeners in this big experiment of creating a more just and equitable world. And even though it might take time and effort, it's so worth it in the end.
Absolutely. And I think that feeling of hope and possibility is what makes this whole journey so amazing.
So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I'm feeling energized and excited to see what the future holds.
Me too. And I can't wait to share some final thoughts that will hopefully leave you feeling inspired and ready to play your part in this incredible social renaissance.
All right, so we've talked about a lot in this deep dive. You know, the need for a social renaissance, for equality, the power of collective action, personal transformation, even some of the challenges we might face. But I'm still kind of stuck on this idea of a renaissance. It's such a big idea. What does that actually look like? What does a world transformed by this vision of equality actually feel like?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's hard to really grasp something so huge, but I think we can start by imagining what it would be like to live in a world where equality is just how things are, woven into the fabric of society.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me your best future utopia. What are we seeing? What are we hearing? What are we feeling in this world where the social renaissance has actually happened?
Well, for one thing, I think it would feel like a world full of possibility, a sense of shared purpose and energy. It wouldn't be about one group winning and another losing. It would be about everyone rising together, everyone using their unique talents and ideas to create something amazing.
I love that. A world where we're not fighting over scraps, but working together to make something bigger for everyone. What else? What are some of the real differences we might see in this Renaissance world?
Imagine walking down the street and seeing all sorts of people in positions of power and influence, women leading companies, men taking care of the home people of all genders and backgrounds, working together in every field.
Yes, and not just seeing it, but feeling it too. Feeling respected and equal in every interaction, knowing that your voice matters, that what you do is valued no matter who you are or what category you fit into.
Exactly. It wouldn't be about just tolerating or accepting each other. It would be about truly appreciating the unique gifts and perspectives that everyone brings to the table.
Okay, so it's not just about representation. It's about a real change in our values and how we treat each other. What about art and culture? How would this renaissance show up in our creative side?
Ooh, I think that's where things get really exciting. Imagine a world where art isn't limited by these old ideas about gender, where we hear stories from all kinds of perspectives, where beauty is celebrated in every form. We'd see so many new voices, new styles, new ways of expressing what it means to be human.
I love that. It's like this whole explosion of creativity unleashed without the limits of the past. What about technology? How would this vision of equality change how we innovate and use tech?
Well, I think we'd see a shift away from technologies that reinforce those old power structures and towards tech that empowers people and communities. Imagine social media designed to bring people together, educational tools that celebrate diversity and challenge stereotypes, virtual realities that help us understand each other better.
So instead of tech dividing us or distracting us, it would be used to connect us, empower us, and help us reach our full potential. Okay, I'm convinced. This future sounds incredible, but how do we get there? It's easy to imagine it, but how do we bridge the gap between where we are now and this amazing vision?
That's where things get challenging, but also really exciting, because it's not about waiting for someone else to create this world for us. It's about each of us taking responsibility for the change we want to see.
So it goes back to that idea of personal transformation leading to collective change, right? It's like the Renaissance starts within each of us.
Exactly. It starts with looking at our own biases, questioning the way things are, and making choices that reflect our values. And then it's about taking action, even small steps, to create change in our own lives.
So each of us becomes like a little Renaissance agent, spreading these ideas of equality and justice through what we say, what we do, and how we express ourselves. And those little actions grow into bigger actions, and those eventually change everything.
I love that. And the best part is we don't have to do it alone. We have each other. We have this shared wisdom and energy to tap into. And that's what makes this vision so powerful. It's not just a dream, it's a real possibility.
So as we finish this deep dive into Sarkar's call for a social renaissance, I'm feeling hopeful and inspired. It's like we've been shown a glimpse of something truly amazing, and it's up to us to make it happen.
And the most important thing to remember is that even the smallest actions can make a difference. Don't underestimate the power of your voice, your choices, your unique contribution to this.
So true. It's like even if we can't paint the whole picture ourselves, we can each add a brushstroke, a color, a detail that contributes to the whole beautiful and complex work.
And that's a great metaphor for this whole journey. We're all artists in this grand creation, making a world that's more vibrant and more fulfilling for everyone. And the most exciting part is we're just getting started.
That's a great place to end, I think. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey, and remember, the Renaissance starts now.